Welcome to FitBody Lifestyle, the show where we dive deep into the world of fitness, health, business, relationships, and the art of living a balanced life. I'm Jami.
And I'm Greg, and we're here to give you the benefit of our experiences in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, the corporate world, running a business, personal development, and building healthy relationships.
Whether you're sweating it out in the gym, hustling in your business, or seeking balance in your everyday life, you're in the right place.
So lace up those sneakers and grab that water bottle, and let's get ready to transform our minds, our bodies, and our lives. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of FitBody Lifestyle. And first of all, I'm joined here by my lovely wife, the love of my life, the love of my life, Jami D, and
AKA Lommel.
AKA Lommel, AKA Mom Bear. And today we're going to talk about something that is a very prevalent topic that we see, or very prevalent thing that we see in this industry of fitness and lifestyle, but it's also something we see in life in the corporate world, which is self-sabotage.
Yeah. I mean, not only do we see it, I'm sure we participated in it.
Oh, really? You think so?
Yeah. So we want to talk about, identifying it and then, what might be some ways to help to, when you do realize that you're doing it, turn things around.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with this. And let's kind of go with the basic definition of self-sabotage, which is simply that it's when you do something intentionally or unintentionally, mostly intentionally. Well, we'll focus on intentionally, but it can be unintentionally, to hinder your own progress or your success. So that's just kind of the simple definition that I would put on it. I don't know if you would want to alter that or add a dimension or a layer to it.
I mean, the only thing I would say is I do think a lot of times it is unintentional, or at least it's unconscious behavior, and, there's so much of our behavior that is driven from our unconscious, from things that have happened in our past. And, a lot of times there is, as funny as it sounds, fear of success. And that's where self-sabotage really comes in and plays a role. We start to get close to achieving what it is that, we've dreamed of, or, we've set as a goal and we put out there for ourselves. And then as we get close, like that fear starts to creep in, and I see this so much in the competition world where, athletes are, close to, maybe they're getting close to getting their pro card and they're almost there, prep is almost over. And then, it's that, fear of like, oh, what if it doesn't happen? What's that going to feel like? Or what if it does happen? And then what's going to be expected of me, or, just a million different things that we don't even sometimes realize are going on back in that subconscious and causing us to then act out in different ways, or maybe not follow through on things that we've committed to. And, then of course, then get frustrated with ourselves and kind of start a vicious cycle of, of more of the same. So that's why I think it's just such a relevant topic right now. Because I do see a lot of people going through this kind of exercise and maybe not really realizing where it's coming from or why it's coming from. It just all of a sudden things seem harder.
Yeah. And I do think, as you described that, I think there's a couple of things that really come out for me, which is there's several aspects to self-sabotage. And one aspect is certainly keeping you from the success or the goal that you are moving towards. But the other part of it is the reason why. What is coming up in your brain? What is the story you're telling yourself? Whether you're telling yourself consciously that story or unconsciously, or it's appearing in your thoughts. What is that thing that's driving that fear or that obstacle that you're throwing in your own way? Was it something in your childhood? Was it something that somebody said to you recently? We've seen that. We've had athletes who have had somebody, they're prepping for a show and they'll be in the gym and somebody will ask them, "Oh wow, you should compete." And it's like, yeah, but don't you know I'm going to be stepping on stage in a week? It's like it's just those things that can impact you externally that then bring up whatever it is that's in the back of your head that then can contribute to self-sabotage.
Yeah. And I mean, this can happen in any aspect of life.
True.
I mean, I definitely...
We see it in relationships all the time.
Oh, absolutely. In relationships, maybe in getting a promotion or a raise at work, or, whatever the situation is, and it, it could be, the reason behind it could be different for each and every person. What I see a lot too is, that fear of, you want something so bad, what if it doesn't happen, and then that starts to ruminate in the brain. And then it's almost like, okay, well then if it doesn't happen, I could say, well, yeah, it didn't happen, but that's because
Yeah.
last week I
Right.
kind of fell off track and this happened and that happened. It's almost like preemptively giving yourself an excuse as to why you didn't achieve it. So it's like that lack of belief in yourself, then driving behaviors that, manifest in the self-sabotage, and I see this and it's so easy to see from the outsider looking in. And I know I've done it in my own life. It's harder to see when we're doing it ourselves. It just all of a sudden feels like things are harder, or, we're distracted, or, whatever. But as a coach, specifically working with athletes, when I see them so fixated on the outcome, and this is why you and I are constantly talking about, staying keeping your mindset, like say if you're going into a show, my goal is to show up the best I can. My goal is to show up and get feedback so I can continue to improve. So like decoupling from the outcome of, I want the win, I want the pro card. Like, of course you do. Like, we're not taking anything away from that. But I feel like when you get so fixated on the outcome, that's a lot of times where that self-sabotage starts to creep in, or that self-doubt starts to then trigger some of that self-sabotage, people at the very last minute. And I mean, I could say this from when I was competing as well. I mean, I did it myself. I remember there were shows where, a lot was on the line and I wanted it so bad. And the night before, maybe I ate too much peanut butter, or I did, I mean, make or break. I mean, I
That's
look
right.
back and I realized, wow, there were probably some shows I would have won had I not self-sabotaged towards the end. So I'm certainly not pointing the finger elsewhere. I mean, I
No.
could definitely say I relate to it, and maybe that's why I recognize it when I see people doing it, and I do my best to help them reframe mentally where they're putting their focus, so that way, it could even happen like now with social media, where people are so fixated on what everybody else looks like and what everybody else is doing. And then they start, the self-doubt creeps in about what they're doing. And then all of a sudden they don't do what they're supposed to do or follow through, those types of things. I do think that social media and that visibility of everything that everybody's doing adds a level of complexity,
It does.
and can feed into
Pressure.
that cycle of self-sabotage as well.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm just thinking about, when we've talked about this before, but I do think it's good to go back to this, is the difference between goals and objectives. Goals are things that you don't have complete control over. Objectives are things that you do. So if the goal, the outcome, is to win, that's a great goal, but you're not in control of that goal. So if that's your only fixation, then you're living in a very binary world of win or lose, win or go home. That's hard. That's hard, and that's a tremendous amount of pressure. Versus if you establish, okay, my goal is to win, but my objectives in this show are A, I want to nail my routine. B, I want to nail my prep and my peak week. C, I want to get good feedback from the judges and see what I can do to improve. Hey, all those three things are achievable and within your ability to control. They are outcomes that you can achieve. So when you're looking at success or failure, you look at, okay, I achieved the objectives that I was in control of. I can't control the other competitors. I can't control the judges. I can't control the lighting, the stage, all these other things. So the outcome, if the outcome's not completely attributable to your actions, then you got to recognize that that's not going to be very fulfilling for you. And it can lead, and if you just are solely fixated on the win, I got to win or not, then you're really setting yourself up for the potential for self-sabotage to appear.
Yeah. One of the funny things that I've noticed is it's a lot of times it's the people that are in the best position. Like they have the most potential, they're the most teed up and ready to go. And they know that, and so they're excited about it. And then the prospect of it not happening is like creeping in and kind of pulling them backwards. And I actually have an athlete that I'm working with right now that I see this going on. And this athlete is absolutely incredible, like so much potential, like we're very close to where we need to be in showtime, and she's done perfect up until now, but as it's all becoming a reality, that's where that self-doubt and that self-sabotage is creeping in. And it's funny because from the other side of things as a coach, I find myself as I'm working to help keep her mindset in a good place, there's that piece of me that wants to say, listen, if you just keep it together, we're going to win this whole thing. And then I know that's going to put that pressure. So I'm
Right.
constantly editing my own,
Coaching, yeah,
communication
yeah.
with the athlete to say, just think about all the fun we're going to have.
Right.
Just think about how amazing it's going to be together and how much fun we had last time we were at a show and we stepped on stage and things like that, to really kind of shift that mindset away
Shift the
from
focal point, right?
away from the outcome, which is what's causing the angst and the fear and the sabotaging sorts of behavior, over to something lighter and and achievable, and you know what I mean, and bringing it back to like, we get to go, we get to have fun, we get to display all of your hard work, and I know it's so much easier said than done, and it's a practice and it's an exercise. So, to me, both from a coaching standpoint, if you're a coach or, whether it be in bodybuilding or in other aspects of the world, or you're a mentor or you're a manager, thinking about, how is the pressure of whatever this person is that you're guiding, how is that affecting, their ability to see things through and to execute every single day, and then maybe finding some smaller objectives or some other ways of looking at it so it doesn't feel so intense and heavy, and on those things that you want the most, or that are the most important to you, that's the most difficult areas to do that in.
Yeah, and as you're talking about this, it just is bringing back a whole lot of life lessons here that I've learned the hard way. But it's really kind of tying yourself to that outcome, and then what happens after that outcome, and the stories that you're telling yourself about what that outcome will mean. And we've seen this in the bodybuilding world of people telling themselves, "Oh my God, if I just get that pro card, if I just get that pro card, everything's going to change." And then they get the pro card, and okay, yeah, they got the pro card, but all these other things that they thought were going to happen didn't happen or don't happen. And I'm not saying that it's not a fantastic achievement. That's not my point at all. In fact, it's an incredible achievement, but it's not everything. And that's when you say that this is everything to me, then you're placing your entire happiness fulfillment on that one point, and it may not be what you think it's going to be. So one of the questions,
and it's just adding a lot of pressure.
Exactly. It adds that pressure in that binary outcome of win or lose. And when things come down to win or lose, man, that margin of error is so small, and the pressure that you're putting on yourself. I've seen this in the corporate world where people say, if I finally get to that manager position, man, I mentored so many people that went for those things, and they got there, and then they're like, wait a second, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And it's like, try to tell you all that stuff that it's not. But when you're so tied to that one outcome of success that you're not looking at the other things that you're doing along the way, it's really easy. And as we bring this back to the topic of self-sabotage, to then do things to undermine that because you've put so much pressure on yourself to achieve. Putting pressure on yourself to achieve is not in and of itself a bad thing, but it becomes a bad thing when it's so intense that you then intentionally or unintentionally do things to inhibit that progress. Again, the definition of self-sabotage. If you want to get a good example of this, man, I'm going to think of a really highly intellectual way of explaining this, and I'm going to do so using The Bachelor and The Bachelorette.
I knew something was coming after you said that.
You can watch that show every season, and you will see people that self-sabotage doing, and all you have to do is watch the show for one season, and you can pick up all the things that you shouldn't do to self-sabotage. But ultimately, it starts with the first meet and greet. There's seemingly always somebody, I'm not going to say always, but there's seemingly always somebody that will drink too much, and they will start acting the fool. They will start saying things that they don't mean or whatever because they're drunk and
nervous.
Nervous. And they're nervous because they're looking at the outcome. And by the way, the Bachelor's like a 16-week or 16 episode series, you're not going to win day one. But if you're putting all that pressure on that outcome of getting the prize of this person, which you don't even know if you want to be with them because you don't even really know them yet, but you're putting all this pressure on yourself, and so you're self-sabotaging yourself by drinking. There are other people that will self-sabotage because they will get caught up in the drama of other people rather than focus on the outcome that they really want, which is connecting with the person that they might ultimately marry on the show.
And how about the number of people that become wallflowers because they're so afraid of making a fool of themselves or being eliminated the first night that they eliminate themselves because they've already got that in their minds. I mean, there's how many people that we don't even ever see that come in on night one, you know what I mean? Besides maybe the introduction and then they get eliminated or whatever. It's, I do think a lot of times we self-eliminate because we're afraid of, being embarrassed or what the outcome might be. And, so sometimes it's easier to just kind of shrink and make ourselves smaller.
And this is not a recap of The Bachelor, Bachelorette.
Although we could do that on another episode.
And the reason I'm bringing that up is because these are very palpable and observable things that you can see people doing that sabotage them from what they really want. They get in their own way. The examples in our world of the bodybuilding world, the examples in the corporate world, I think we talked about a little bit, but these things happen. So the question is that the next question I think that is on my mind is, how do you know if you're doing it?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. I mean, that self-awareness piece is challenging, and I think it's something we're all consistently working on. I do feel that if you have somebody who's close to you that you trust and that can express things to you, and I know that you and I do this for each other as a sounding board because we know each other. We've been together 20 years, and we typically can kind of sort through what might be behind some of the actions, and if we can in a loving and kind way just like say something to help that introspection start to happen, I think that can be a helpful way. I definitely think journaling can be helpful too. Therapy is great.
Therapy is wonderful. And I do think that I mean, you're right where I wanted you to go, which is, and I'm sorry for setting you up with maybe a bad question, but well, I do that. I do that all the time, and I'm sorry about that. But I also believe in you, and I know that we think so much alike, and when it comes to these things. So I do think having that sounding part about there's an acronym that somebody gave me once for meetings, which is WAIT. Why am I talking? And I guess you could take that to waste, which is why am I self-sabotaging? I'm just adding an S on that, not wait, W-A-I-S-T, it's W-A-I-S-S. Why am I self-sabotaging? And it's hard to get in that moment of recognizing the behaviors that you're doing. But what I would tell you is that there's usually a inciting event. So I'm going to go with the Bachelor, Bachelorette example that I was given. If you're that person that's drinking too much on night one, well, how do you know you drank too much? But at the point where you've drank too much, you've drank too much. I mean, it's done. At that point, you're drunk. But along the way, if you know that, hey, normally I drink 2 drinks and this is my 3rd drink, why am I self-sabotaging? Is it, man, I feel so much pressure. All these other people are so amazing. What do I have to bring to the table? And yes, by the way, these questions that I'm asking are not just ones for the Bachelor, Bachelorette. They would apply to you as a competitor as well. Why am I self-sabotaging? Why did I binge last night? Why did I go over my macros by a significant amount? Why did I empty that jar of peanut butter? Why? What is it that's going on inside of me? And taking some time to reflect. I love what you said about having that sounding board, that person in your life that hopefully you can talk to and say, hey, look, I'm on this journey. Maybe it's your coach. Maybe it's somebody, another athlete. Maybe it's your friend, brother, sister, what father, mother, spouse. Yeah. It's look, I'm moving towards this goal and I just ate all this stuff that I wasn't supposed to eat and I don't know why. And then just having somebody say, well, what were you feeling? What was going through your mind? Were you watching something at the time? What was the thought in your head that led you to believe? And then asking those next questions, which is, what's success look like for you at the end of this? What does it mean? And if you respond with, well, success is winning, well, then that may be a telltale that you're putting pressure on yourself where you don't need to.
Yeah. And I mean, I absolutely, I think this is so prevalent when it comes close to showtime for a lot of athletes. Like even athletes that have been doing this for a long time, sometimes especially, you know what I mean? I do think that the more successful you are, the more pressure you put. A lot of times when we start anything, a hobby, a job, anything like that, we might be putting a little bit less pressure, kind of having fun as we're getting to learn and things like that. But as we start to master something, our expectations of ourselves continues to grow, and the expectations of others around us continue to grow as well. It's funny to me. A lot of times I was at a show with an athlete, about a month ago. And I remember her saying, it was after prejudging, and then she, people were like, "You got this, you're winning, blah, blah, blah." And she goes, "I wish people would stop doing this. I know they're doing it because they believe in me and they're doing it for the right reasons, but it feels like so much pressure. Like, I feel like if it doesn't happen, I'm going to let people down." And so I see this a lot during peak week because everybody's juicing them up and everything else, which of course is coming from such a
place.
great, loving place. And you want that, you want people to believe in you, but it's just kind of funny how that's a double-edged sword too, that, the more people believe in you, the more you feel like people are expecting of you. And then you start to, the mind starts going, "Oh my gosh, what if I let everybody down? What if I can't do this?" And then those thoughts can drive actions that ultimately are counterproductive to achieving the goal. I just think we have to be careful with what we feed into our mind, both in terms of our own thoughts as well as, outside pressures, or even even if, let's say we're towards the end of a goal, we're in peak week for a show, what are we choosing to listen to? What kind of podcasts, what kind of shows are we watching? What are we looking at on social media? Like all of the things that we're also putting into our minds, So, I do think that, if you start kind of feeling yourself pulling into this place of angst or of self-doubt, that can ultimately potentially turn into some self-sabotage, maybe looking at some of those aspects of, what kinds of thoughts am I entertaining? Because thoughts are going to come and go in our minds, but which ones are we actually entertaining?
Yes.
And which ones are we...
What am I hosting? Right.
Exactly. Which ones are we noticing that don't serve us? Okay, I just had this self-doubt thought. Okay, that's okay. That's not serving me right now. I'm going to shift over and think about this, something else that's more productive. So, controlling that, and then also, thinking about like, how can I make sure that what I'm, consuming around me is feeding into, a positive place for me.
So as you're describing this, you're just making me remember something, and you're going to laugh at this, but maybe you will. Maybe you'll get mad at me for it, which is fine too.
I'm scared now.
So no, it's good. I promise you. So we're playing pickleball the other night, and my daughter joined us for the first time. And this is traditionally we do it on Mondays, and it's traditionally all guys that show up. Well, my daughter showed up, and she joined us for pickleball, and she's actually pretty good, but she was struggling with some serve, and we got her over that. And I could tell why she was struggling with the serve, because she was telling. I just could tell the longer she took to set up the serve, the more likely it was that she wasn't going to get the serve in. And I just said, just whack the ball, just don't think, just whack the ball. And she got to that point. So we played several games, and we did not win, but this group, this pair that we were playing, which happened to be one of which was Drew, but we're playing him and Joe, and not that these names need to mean anything to you, but we're playing them. We had lost 3 times to them, but this one game we were ahead. It was the first time we'd been ahead in all these games. And I said something to her that I wish I could have pulled back, which is, this is the first time we've been ahead for all these
that was
games.
it.
And that was it. And then the next serve she did, it went in the net. And it was not her fault. It was my fault. Because I unintentionally self-sabotaged her, but I knew what was going through her head. And it was almost like an outcome I could have written, because I knew that she was putting pressure on herself to win, even though that wasn't the outcome that I wanted. The outcome that I wanted was for us to play well, and for us to get in good rallies, and for her to continue to improve as she was playing. But when I put the emphasis on winning, it put the pressure on her. And then anyway, it was just, as you're describing that result. And if you've never played pickleball, you don't need to, it's not that important that you understand how it was played, other than that there's a serve that starts every point. And I put pressure on her, and I think there was some self-sabotage there, or some Greg sabotage on her.
Yeah. And actually, I've learned this through making mistakes, as most of the lessons we learn in life are through making mistakes. And I've done the same thing with athletes, because I was excited and I was proud of them.
Right.
And so I inadvertently, expressed that. And then, and I've seen that backfire in the same kind of way. Say maybe they won their class, and I'm like, oh, now we just got to win that overall. And then it's like, oh no. Then they start putting pressure instead of just celebrating the moment. And I'm just so proud of you, way to go out there and just have some fun, where it just kind of keeps that momentum going without adding that extra stress. So, it can be external and it could be internal, it could be our own internal dialogue doing the same exact thing to us. So I think it's a great example of, and I've had those, you have those moments and you want to express it. And at the same time, sometimes you've got to just okay, let's let it play out first. And then we'll celebrate and talk about it afterwards.
Right. And I know for me, as I'm playing, again, pickleball, just using that as an example, that if I'm thinking about the win for the point instead of just hit the ball, it puts pressure on me, and I find myself not focused on what I'm doing. Because the self-sabotage, part of what's happening in that process is that you're not thinking about the moment. You're thinking about the future. And what's that quote that you gave me from the Buddha or something from Confucius about, if you're thinking about the future, you're stressed. If you're thinking about the past, you're depressed. So think in the moment. Mm-hmm. I think, is that the right quote?
Yeah. If you focus on the future, it causes anxiety. If you focus on the past, it
causes depression.
Feel depression. So if you stay in the moment, that's where,
that's the sweet spot.
And it's so much easier said than done.
Oh, yeah.
It's, although I do this exercise. Sometimes if I do feel myself feeling anxious, I'm like, okay, what premonitions or what expectations or, what am I focusing on, because if you can recognize that, and then let's bring it into the present moment. What do I need to do right now? Because if all I'm focused on what I need to do right now, then there's not a worry in the world, because, there's only now.
That's right.
And the only thing we can change is now. We can't change yesterday and we can't change tomorrow. What we can do is execute today. And I actually tell that to clients frequently when they start. They'll be 3 months ahead, 4 months ahead. Okay, let's just make sure today we're doing what we need to do. And then the rest of it's going to fall into place.
Yeah.
So we talk a lot about planning and goals and objectives and all these other things. And at the same time, I don't know how many people will relate to this, but I took golf lessons for a little while. And I just remember going through these golf lessons, and there's 500 things that you're mastering in this golf swing. And then after they teach you all these things, they're like, okay, now don't think about anything, just swing, and you're like, but you told me to hold it like this and do it like this and make sure you're doing this. And then
so right.
And that's how I think about life in a lot of cases. It's we do all this preparation and then we need to just swing. We need to just let go of it all. If we've done our homework and we've executed, the plan as we should have, then we should just be able to have fun and be present in the moment. So much easier said than done.
It is. Well, in fact, that's the talk that I had with our daughter after we walked off the court was simply was that, when you're so focused on winning, I find it's very easy to get tight in your swing. And I said that's always my own personal mantra that I'll go is hit through the ball, let go. Even if it means that you lose that point, but you let go and you just hit, it feels so much better and so much more, freeing to do that in that moment. And it's so easy to get tight. We see it with athletes posing all the time. If they'll come into our room to pose, and you can tell that they will self-sabotage in certain way. If they're not good with the feedback in that moment, they will just not pick up those little subtle differences. And so when they get on the stage, they're doing everything that we told them not to do, or that they practice not doing. And part of that is just that self-sabotage of just not being in the moment and letting go and just worrying about what you're going to do in that moment.
Yeah.
Which is, like you said, is easier said than done.
Right.
So we talked a little.
It's a practice.
It is a practice.
It's a practice. It's something that the more you practice, the better you will get at it. The more you focus on letting go. When we talk about, if you haven't read, we talk about books. So The Power of Now, that book was very impactful for me. And if you haven't read it, or even if you have read it and you want to read it again, I find that the one on the audio one, because I've read it and I've listened to it, where it's Eckhart Tolle's voice. He has like this very peaceful voice. So that for me, like, it's all about being in the present moment and coming into the now, and how we get so fixated on these external things. So, something like that could be good. It's kind of like a meditation in itself, like listening to a chapter here and there, if you find yourself, ruminating. But that's one of the reasons I'm saying, like, the input we put into our minds can really determine like where our heads go. So if we find ourselves like getting really anxious and focusing on other things, like something like that, the Power of Now book, or if there's something else that resonates, it might be a podcast or something else
I do
can
have
really
another
help.
book.
Okay, tell us.
Well, and the other book is Brene Brown's Dare to Lead, and I'm unabashedly a Brene Brown fanboy. And Brene, if you're listening to this, I'm your number one fan.
And he said it on more than one podcast, so maybe she has heard it by now.
I have given away about 300 copies of Dare to Lead over time, and that was a personal goal that I set to give away at least 200 of those. So I think my count is now up to 300, but there's a story in there that she relays. One of the principles that she talks about in the book is the story you tell yourself, and what are you telling yourself, and to get in tune with that. But she tells a story about Admiral Stockdale, who was a Vietnam Navy pilot who was captured and was staying at the Hanoi Hilton, or interned at the Hanoi Hilton. And he was interviewed years later, and he was asked what prisoners had the most difficult time. And he said, oh, that's very easy. The ones that were the most optimistic. And the interviewer said, what? I would think optimism would really help you in that context. And he said, no, because what would happen with the optimists is they would think that they would be rescued by Easter. And then Easter would come around and they wouldn't get rescued. And so they said, okay, well, we're going to get rescued by 4th of July. And then 4th of July would come, and they wouldn't get rescued. And that would lead subsequently to this depression that they would get into, depress, and they would stop doing the things that they needed to do on the daily to survive. Simple hygiene things, making sure that they get whatever food that they could get, doing the things that are necessary on the daily to make sure that they are ready if there is a rescue, because they were so disappointed by the expectation they had in being rescued. And that's very similar to what we're talking about in self-sabotage, is that when you set something in your mind as this is success or this is failure, and it's in the future, and then
it's something you can't control.
And it's something you can't control, and then that doesn't happen, that produces this depression and can then lead to that self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm. And, for those that don't want to read, they actually, there's a great Netflix series that Brene Brown also has that I've had a lot of people watch. And it's one that I've watched, God, probably 10 times. I think there are certain things that are uplifting, and like those aha opportunities, whether they're books or TED Talks or podcasts or whatever it is, that you can always go back to. And if you find those things that resonate, I think that, during those times where we all struggle, we all go into these modes where none of us are off the hook when it comes to it, having these things that help us ground us and remind us like what's truly important. It's funny how I feel like, I see myself do it sometimes. I get so fixated on something, a goal or something I'm working towards. And if I can just pan out, to the big picture a little bit more, it takes a little bit of the pressure or the sting or the angst out of it. And I can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, most of these things that we're doing, if we're bodybuilding, for most of it's a hobby. So it's like, reminding yourself, like, you're doing this because it's fun and because you enjoy it, and, there's nothing that's going to be the be all end all, or it's not the end of the world. It's all an opportunity for growth. And each and every day, that's what I get the opportunity to do is grow and see what I'm capable of.
And along the way to whatever outcome is going to happen, if you're so focused on that outcome, you can so often miss the beautiful things, the beautiful flowers that occur along the way. And I just think about all that with relative to goals. And sometimes, we're moving towards a goal, but ultimately another goal manifests, another opportunity manifests. And if you're so fixated on that one goal that you miss an opportunity for something else, for some enrichment, some fulfillment, some element of beauty that is along the way, like maybe you just didn't tap into the fact that, okay, I didn't win that show, but man, I got to meet all these wonderful people. I had a wonderful time. It's like what you were talking about in the fun piece. I got to make all these great connections. And man, I really did have a good time on the stage. No, I didn't win, but it always comes down to this, is that if you get your pro card or you do win, what are you going to do? I'm going to compete. Well, if you don't get your pro card.
I was thinking, that was in my head. You say that all the time to athletes, and I love it. What are you going to do if you win?
Compete. What are you going to do if you don't
win?
Compete.
So
focus on that aspect of it, and take the pressure off of yourself to make these. Putting pressure on yourself, I find that people put pressure on the wrong things. They're putting pressure on the outcome instead of on the process. And that pressure on the process should be, but the pressure on the process carries with it some risk too, because it's like I'm adhering to my macros and I self-sabotage and I go off my macros. Well, if you're in the F it mindset, then you can go off and, well, I screwed today up. I might as well screw my whole prep because it's over now because I did this one thing, rather than saying, okay, I did this. Now let me focus on tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow's a chance that I get to do it again, and I get to do it better than I did today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, so I think when we talk about it, it comes down to, first and foremost, recognizing when you're doing it, then digging down, why am I doing it? And then how can I start to reframe my own thoughts and then also infuse into my thought process positivity and opportunities to be present, enjoy the process, understand that in most cases, it's not life or death. It's that fight or flight that a lot of times causes us to start self-sabotaging, and our bodies don't know whether we're being chased by a bear or if we're just worried about winning a bodybuilding show. Like that, that fight or flight, it's the same thing. It's the same hormones that are released, the cortisol levels. It's, it's an actual chemical reaction that's happening.
And it's there for your survival.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's there for a good reason. So, I think that, a lot of times it's really just recognizing, hey, this isn't a life or death situation. I can take a breath. I can relax. I can move forward. Okay, things weren't perfect today. Like you said, I can pick it up and start fresh and tomorrow morning, that kind of thing. I feel like these are life-changing opportunities, truly, truly.
I've told people this story. You've heard me tell it a number of times, but I was a trial attorney for years, and before every trial, and I learned, and I don't remember who I picked this technique up from, but I had heard it somewhere, so I started applying it. And before every trial I would get into the courtroom a little bit early, and I would walk around the courtroom and I would touch everything. I would touch the table that I was sitting at. I would touch the chairs. I would go sit in all the jurors' chairs. I'd sit in the witness chair. Hopefully I was in the courtroom early enough that the judge wasn't in there and I could sit in the judge's chair. And part of that was for my own orientation. I wanted to get familiar with angles and where people could see things if I was introducing exhibits or using visual aids or something. I wanted to have that awareness. I wanted to know what the jury could see, what they couldn't see. But the other part of that process that I went through, and this is the most powerful part of the process, is I would repeat to myself in my head, nobody's going to die. Everything's going to be okay. Nobody's going to die. everything's going to be okay. That little practice, because I will tell you, I was very fixated, and it was very easily to get fixated on the outcome. I had a client depending on me. There were, in some case, millions of dollars at stake in these trials. It was always something that I did to ground myself in the be present now and not worry about what happens at the end of this. Yes, plan, yes, project, yes, strategize, but don't get so fixated on the outcome that I am putting a life or death moment on that. So I took the pressure off myself by doing that. And that was a practice that I employed maybe a third of the way into my trial practice, and I found that it made the hugest difference. And the other thing I would do is go through in my mind other instances where I was facing a life or death outcome, and this was not that. And just, if you contextualize what you're going through with other events in your life that were pretty meaningful, I think we can go back and think about things that affected both of us that really, on this grand scheme of things, whether we win a show or not is really not going to determine the trajectory of the planet. It's not going to stop the flow of the earth.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, we talked about that earlier. It's easy to get so fixated on something in the moment that sometimes it's hard to pull back. And that's how I describe exactly what you're saying. Like if I pull myself back from the situation and in the scheme of life and in the scheme of what's truly important, your health, your loved ones, your security. I mean, things like that. Like we're talking like the main needs that we have as human beings. And then we start fixating on something that's like, I want to make sure that I get this promotion, or I want to
Right.
make sure that I win this show. I mean, I'm not saying those things aren't important and aren't meaningful, but when you are able to back away in the scheme of life as a whole, it's easier to go, okay, yes, this is important to me, but it doesn't rise to the scale of me being in full panic mode or self-sabotage, which turns into self-sabotage mode anyway. Once we start panicking, we freeze up, or we do things that, are unintentional, or, or we don't do what we're supposed to, whatever the situation can be. So, I love that. And of course, we've talked to people, if they get to a show and they can walk around and walk on the stage, or,
Yep.
like just exactly what you did in the courtroom, sometimes that puts their mind at ease, because it's like, okay, I've stepped on the stage without the judges looking at me and I survived. It's going to be fine. I'm fine. I love that. I think that's a
The other
great
exercise, you've seen me do this with other people, is that if they're putting so much pressure on themselves for a show, I'll say, okay, what's the worst thing you think is going to happen on stage? And this gets into the Brene Brown and Dare to Lead, is I'm asking them, what's the story you're telling yourself? And it's almost always the same answer, which is, I'm going to fall on stage. And I said, okay, what happens if you fall on stage? And they say, and when they actually walk through the thought of that, they say, well, I'd get up and keep going on. Exactly. Nobody's going to die. Everything's going to be okay. All right. And I guarantee you, the judges are going to remember you,
and respect you for continuing.
Because we've seen it happen.
Yes.
We've seen it happen. We've seen people just completely, boof on stage, and they get up, and the ones that just get up like nothing ever happened, man, the respect factor for those go way up. And I'm telling you this other part, which is the win that you thought was the win of getting the trophy or the first place may not be the win that really matters, because you get up and you prove to yourself, man, I could do that. I totally flipped on stage. One of our athletes, one of our pros, she posted a reel several months ago about she had all the foibles on stage that she had to produce this product that she has now, which is extremely polished and everything. She embraced those mistakes. She enjoyed those mistakes. The mistakes are really the thing that makes you better. And that's hard. That's hard in that moment of self-sabotage where you can realize that, okay, I made a mistake. Now I'm going to build on that.
Perfect is boring.
Yes, it is.
Perfect is boring. If everybody was perfect, life wouldn't be interesting at all.
And perfect is also a fiction.
True.
There really is no such thing. Perfection is a subjective measure at best, and recognize that. So as we talk through this thing, I think let's go back and recap this as we wind this down. So the first thing is, and I think, I'm going to go back to the first thing, maybe is, well, we define what self-sabotage, which is unintentional or intentional or unintentional actions that you're taking to inhibit your progress. So how do you know when you're in it? And partly is that self-awareness, taking inventory of yourself. taking inventory of your day. You mentioned journaling. And I think journaling is so powerful to really put that out in writing. Both the physical aspect of writing is so impactful and so anchoring yourself to whatever it is that you're doing. But writing that down of what is the story I'm telling myself? Why am I putting all this pressure? Why am I feeling this way? I think that moment of just self introspection is really, in my mind, the key to combating self sabotage. I don't know if you'd think something else.
No, I think that's very, very, very accurate.
And then the next part is then, okay, so I'm in it now. What do I do? And I think what you said before was really kind of the key, which is who's my circle, who's my go-to, who's my ride or die that I can call and talk to about this. Journaling is very effective in that moment as well. But
Because that's your conversation with yourself.
That's right.
Because yourself is also is your counselor as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. What would you say? Anything else on that?
Well, I mean, I did mention, therapy. Sometimes
therapy.
sometimes if you don't have somebody that you feel like can be neutral enough for you, sometimes that's a great opportunity as well. So, but I think having, whether it's you're bouncing it off of yourself with journaling, or if you're speaking with someone that know is going to be there for you and be trusted, either a therapist, friend, family member, whatever. I definitely think that helps. Like, it's just that verbalizing, getting it out of your head. Sometimes being able to look at it, whether it's on paper or by verbalizing it, can then take the power away from whatever's swirling around in your mind.
And the last thing I think is, and I hope this comes out right. You'll help me if I'm wrong or off target, but it's basically decoupling or reordering outcome and action. If your outcome is driving your actions, then you've got that reversed. You need to let your actions drive the outcome, and whatever that outcome is. But if you're putting the emphasis and the first stop in your head is on the win, if the outcome, that's the win. If that's the predominant thought in your head, you're going to miss the actions that you need to take to drive that outcome. Mm-hmm. So you need to reorder things and decouple the emphasis on success or failure from the outcome, and recouple that emphasis on the actions that you're taking. Am I doing the things right now, today, in this moment, that I need to do to at least make that outcome possible? Versus win.
Yeah, we get better by doing.
Yeah. Would you say that's right?
We get better by doing, and in a lot of cases, we get better by failing. So that's where the outcome is not the focus. The outcome or the focus is the execution and the path to get there. And part of that path will likely include some failure, and that's good. That's part of the process.
For years, I've talked to, and if you've been in the corporate world or whatever, you may have heard this phrase, raise the bar of your performance, and raise the bar. And I love that metaphor, that action, but to me, that's an acronym for me that is BAAR. B is belief. You've got to believe that you can do something. If you believe that you can, that will shape your attitude. Your attitude then drives your actions, and then your actions produce your results. BAAR. So it's really the action steps, but they all generate from the attitude that you have, which is mindset, which we've talked about, and then the belief that you have in yourself that you can do something. But raise your own bar, form your belief, shape your attitude, drive your actions, and then your actions will produce that result. That result may not be a win, but the result may be something so much more than just a win. That if you get a piece of knowledge that you can apply going forward, that's priceless. And that can take you beyond the singular win into multiple wins that may not show up as trophies, but may show up as you being a better person, which ultimately should be which ultimately is our final goal.
Yeah. And I would say even recognizing when you are self-sabotaging in itself is a win.
Yes.
So
100%.
And so be careful not to then, you recognize it and get mad at yourself and then punish yourself. Like that's not useful. I mean, really celebrating, hey, I actually caught myself this time. I recognized I was doing it. Now I have an opportunity to do things differently. So I think celebrating every little piece along the way, and with this specific subject matter, just starting with recognizing and becoming more self-aware is huge.
That almost is a mic drop moment, babe. Because I do love that. Is celebrate the fact that you recognize the behaviors, and then you embarked on correcting those behaviors, and you became a better person for it. And the next time, it'll still be hard, but it'll be a little less hard.
Yep.
And or a little easier, and then a little easier, a little easier. And as you're slowly chipping away at that wall, you can ultimately get that breakthrough. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, we good?
We're good.
All right, so you know the admonitions. God, I'm going all lawyer mode. But remember the admonitions, which is
Order in the court.
Like, comment, subscribe, leave your review. We really like your feedback. We really want to know it. It shapes some of the episodes that we got coming up. When you do that, so please do share. And remember the 3 B's, which is be good to yourself,
Be good to each other,
and be safe. Take care, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in to FitBody Lifestyle. We hope today's episode has left you feeling motivated and equipped to tackle your fitness goals, business challenges, and the daily dance of life. Remember to value progress over perfection. Life's tough enough alone. Find the chosen family around you to help you along the way.
If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite streaming platform. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at FitBody Fusion.